Today's episode makes references to self-harm and suicide. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or struggling with their mental health, please know that support is available. You can reach the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988 or visit their website at www.988lifeline.org, which I will definitely include in the show notes. Hey everyone, welcome to Everyday Fi, the show that explores the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. Last week I spoke with David, and our discussion centered on his mental health struggles in the military, and I just want to say I'm so grateful to him for opening up and sharing his experiences. I really think that him doing that will help other people in their struggles. This week, though, we are back with David and talking about his FI journey. We're also going to talk about how he got the name Mr. Quit Your Job while attending all the different FI events. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation after a word from our sponsors. Why don't we talk about FI a little bit?
Sure.
It sounds like FI was kind of one of the things that helped kind of pull you out of this as well, because you had something besides just Ashley pulling you kind of towards something else. And you said your buddy O'Toole on the boat was the one who introduced you to Mr. Money Mustache. But what kind of made you gravitate towards financial independence, retire early, specifically as a financial model versus some of the other financial models like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman or some of these other more classic models where you save 10% versus 50%?
Yeah, that's a good question. It came at a perfect time in my life because I was really burned out from my job, really unhappy, and realizing that I didn't need to stay in for the full 20 years to get that pension. And I didn't need those realistic bonuses, that I could kind of create that on my own. But that was super helpful. And it gave me a lot more confidence to not re-enlist again, because I was coming up at a point where I was supposed to make the decision to re-enlist and get another one of those 6-figure bonuses. And actually, what's interesting is that I actually met Doug Nordman right around that time. At that time, I didn't know that there were things like CampFI. I didn't know there were local ChooseFI meetups. And so I heard that Mr. Money Mustache was going to be speaking at FinCon, which is not really a FI event. There's a lot of FI people there. But when I heard that, I was like, oh, I want to go down there and learn more about this fire thing. So when I was there, Doug Nordman was also there. And I had heard him on the Mad Fientist podcast. I was listening to it in my car, and he's like, hey, I'm Doug Nordman, and I did 20 years in the Navy. And I was like, oh, I'm in the Navy. And then he says, and I was on submarines. And I was like, I was on submarines. This was kind of cool. So anyway, I met Doug Nordman at FinCon, and we chatted a little bit. And I told him that I had originally intended to stay in for 20 years, but I didn't really like my job and blah, blah, blah. And he told me his own story about how he did do 20 years in the Navy, but he really regrets staying in for that full retirement, because at about his 12-year point, he said he had gotten to a point in his career where it wasn't fun anymore. But he sort of had that same golden handcuffs problem where he felt like he was giving up too much with the pension. And he talked about how he and his wife were such good savers. They were investing through their entire careers. They always lived beneath their means, and they were investing huge chunks of money. And he basically pointed out that he could have worked a civilian job, gotten out at 12 years, worked a civilian job, and it only would have delayed early retirement by a few years. And so anyway, his talk with me about how he regretted doing 20 years and he wished he would have gotten out early when the job stopped being fun. That really gave me a lot more confidence, because everybody else was telling me how dumb I was, right? Everybody else was telling me that no, you got to stay in for the 20. You're a fool if you give up that pension. It's worth millions of dollars. And those things are true. It is worth a lot of money. But the reality is I was not happy. And frankly, if I had taken that advice, I would not be here today. You know what I mean? I know that I would not have made it. Having the fire community and having this sort of contrasting voice saying, no, you should pursue things that are a better fit for you, even if it means making less money or giving up that pension. Yeah, that was really helpful. But I will say I discovered fire, and then we talked about all those mental health issues. We talked about how fire does not make you happy. Money does not make you happy. And that is 100% true, because I was investing huge chunks of money. The stock market after 2018 just went crazy. And I was in Hawaii. I was living cheap and investing probably 70% of my paycheck, and I was miserable. And I wasn't miserable because I was saving so much. I was miserable because I really had no close personal friends. So I was divorced from my wife. I was totally alone. And it really is true. Money does not make you happy. Money itself, right? You can use money as a tool, but to make your life better and fill it with more happy things and get rid of the bad things. But I would say fire itself probably did not help me in that sense, but it did help me have the confidence to not re-enlist one more time.
Yeah. And then I feel like fire kind of comes with its own community that you get to plug into, right? It's very different than other financial circles. I just feel like we have more of a community than anything that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, especially now, there's so many in person travel meetup groups, things. It all blossomed out of Camp Mustache and CampFI, and now the Bali trips, and CampFI is going to Spain. And I just went to Fire in Las Vegas in April and met a ton of people there. And I'm still talking to all of them. We say this a lot, but we found our people, right? So in a way, the money might not have given you that, but the fire community seems like it has given you. You mentioned that most of your friends are in this community now. It's beautiful to me.
Yeah, 100%. And I went to my first CampFI in 2021 after I got stationed in Norfolk. They were having one in Virginia. And I learned about it. And I immediately bought 2 tickets and I texted Ashley and I said, hey, do you want to go to CampFI? And she said, yeah. It's interesting because the fire community has probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in it online, but most of them are just online. And whenever I meet a person in real life who I learned that they're kind of interested in fire, and it's like, oh, you need to go to an event, right? Go to CampFI, go to Econome, go to one of these in-person events, or at least join your local ChooseFI group and go to a local meetup or organize a meetup, because it's totally different in person, right? And having people that you know personally and that you actually interact with in person, not just on like a Facebook forum, it makes a huge amount of difference. And I remember going to my first CampFI and just like you said, you finally found your people, you know what I mean? And yeah, like I said, probably 95% of my friends are in the fire community. And that's why I've been to probably 13 or 14 CampFIs. I've been to like a bunch of economies, been to the Five Freedom Retreat twice. Yeah, for me, it's like this, like having friends, people that you actually interact with in person. And it just fills me up with so much happiness. So it's like, I want more of this. Yeah, so if you're listening out there and you've never been to a local event, at least join your local ChooseFI group. And if they're not already scheduling meetups, be that person that initiates a meetup. Just go meet at a Starbucks or a park or whatever, because it really is different meeting people in person. And frankly, if you're on the path fire, like sometimes that can be kind of a long, boring path, and like having people along the way to keep you motivated and also be that opposing voice that says, hey, don't buy that brand new Ford F-150. Spend money on the things that you value, because everybody else is going to be telling you, oh, you need to work until you're 65 and build up your retirement assets, and then you can start having fun, right? So you really need those other voices kind of encouraging you to, I don't know, take chances now, enjoy life now, but design your perfect life now and not wait until you're 65. So yeah, go be social, be part of the in-person community, because it's way better than the online community.
Yeah, it's so much fun when you get to share your spreadsheets with people who actually want to look at them. Because believe me, the people in my life are like, please stop showing me your spreadsheet, Megan. Even though I don't really do the math part, I basically just do like a sum function and that's it. But I still like to put all my numbers in a spreadsheet, but I don't know how to do like the complicated stuff, but I still have spreadsheets. I agree with you. You should definitely join something, anything. And it's not that expensive either, especially CampFIs are all around the country too. So if you can find one that's near you where you can maybe drive there, it's really not that expensive to go. And it's so worth it. Just know you're not going to sleep for 3 days though, because there's so much to do, so many people to talk to, including your roommate. And it's worth every minute, but you're going to want to take a day or two afterwards to sleep.
If you're listening, definitely at least do the local ChooseFI meetups. But what I like about things like CampFI is that it goes from a Friday afternoon to a Monday morning. And especially when you're making friends, that's like a common theme of the fire community is everybody is looking to make friends, right? Even if they don't think that's what they're doing. It's hard to make friends as an adult. So it's easy when you're in college because you're just kind of friends with everybody and you're all very malleable and you all jive with each other. But it's much harder when you're in your 30s and 40s. It's kind of like dating. It's like way harder when you're older. But anyway, the reason I say all that is that buy a ticket to CampFI or something like that where you're there for about 3 days and it allows you to get past sort of the surface level niceties. Oh, where are you from? What do you do? Yada, yada, yada. It allows you to really get to know people and like stay up late into the night around the campfire, around the dinner table or whatever. And when you have those deeper conversations, like number one, it allows you to get into topics that maybe you weren't willing to get into with a stranger. But now this person's not really a stranger. You've been talking to him all weekend. And it allows you to get a little bit more vulnerable. And frankly, doing all of those things helps you form those deeper bonds, right? This isn't just, oh, this is a guy that I met at CampFI. It's, oh no, this is my friend Joey. We had a great time that weekend and really form those deep bonds. So anyway, definitely do in-person stuff. But like I'm telling you, go to CampFI, go to Econome, go to things where you are in a somewhat not isolated environment, but you're really with those people for a long weekend. And you have that opportunity to have those longer, deeper conversations about real life stuff. CampFI ranges anywhere from like $450 to $550 a ticket. And that includes like your hotel room and your food and everything. People think that, oh, I'll go there because these people are presenting on topics that I'm interested in. That's not really why you go. Those are great and you learn a lot and you take away a lot from the presentations. But it's really, like I said, those individual conversations that you have with people and the late night conversations. And just things like one of the things I love doing is like looking at people's numbers and plugging everything in and kind of determining, hey, maybe you're financially ready to retire now. My wife makes fun of me because I'm Mr. Quit Your Job, but it's only because a lot of people I talk to have just like oversaved and they think that they need to keep working for X number of years, but really they're probably financially ready to go right now. And that's the type of thing. A lot of people go to CampFI on a Friday and they say, yeah, I think I'm not really sure if I'm ready financially. And then you have 50 really smart people that know how to look at all those numbers. And a lot of people leave on Monday morning. They say, hey, I wrote a letter of resignation to my boss. It really gives you that confidence to do that. So anyway, I don't want to labor on about that. Go buy a ticket to CampFI, buy a ticket to Econome, or at least go be in person social at some of these ChooseFI meetups.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my goals in life is to get to a place where you tell me to quit my job. Let's back up just a little bit. I want to know a little bit about how you kind of grew up with money and what one of your first money memories is, and then kind of how your parents talked about money. Because I think that can tell us a lot about a person's philosophies in life when it comes to finances.
That's a good question. And it's hard to answer. When I was growing up, we definitely didn't talk about money at all. And we grew up, I would say, somewhat lower middle class. It's hard to decide the defining line. Like, we generally lived in like a small apartment or often a mobile home, but you don't really know those things when you're a kid. And I don't think that we were poor because we had 3 meals a day. We never had housing insecurity or food insecurity or anything like that. And my parents both worked hard, but they were pretty low wage workers. And my mom was, most of the time growing up, she was a waitress. She worked at Sam's Club for a while. My dad, he worked at the mobile home park that we lived at. He cleaned the pool and kept it clean and stuff like that. So they had somewhat sort of low wage jobs. If they ever talked about money, they probably did it when me and my sister were not in the room, but we really never had those conversations. So my earliest money memory, I don't really remember a lot from my early childhood. I remember really enjoying making money because it meant that I got to spend on things that I wanted to spend on. And so that mobile home park that we lived at, it was predominantly retirees, like a 55 and older community. And so a lot of them, they're called snowbirds. They stay the winter in Arizona and the summer in, Minnesota or Canada. They avoid the Arizona heat. And during the summer, I would take care of their properties. I would keep their properties clean. I would water the trees, things like that. And I think I was charging like $10 a month for each one of them to do that. And it was so fun to make money and have money of my own to spend when I was like 10 years old. And I remember I did that for a couple of summers and I was able to save up enough the third summer. I think I was in maybe seventh or eighth grade that I had $1,000 to buy a computer, which was awesome. This is back when the computers cost $1,000. And that was such a cool feeling because up until that time, my parents had a computer, but I always had to ask for permission. Like, hey, is it okay if I use the computer? And it was out in the living room, so there's no privacy or anything like that. Like not that I was doing anything wrong. It was just one of those things where it wasn't mine. It's borrowing your parents' car. It's not your own, even if they let you use it. And so that was such a cool feeling. I remember going to Best Buy and buying my computer. And then it was just mine. I could do whatever I wanted. And back then it was like pirating music off of Kazaa and talking to my friends on AOL Instant Messenger. That was like so cool back then. And just the fact that it was mine, it was like a really cool feeling. And then same thing when I bought my car, it was such a sense of freedom. But this is like I can go anywhere I want to. So I think that was probably my earliest money memory, was really enjoying making money.
Where do you think that sense of wanting to save up and buy the big thing came from versus like some kids will just spend it as they get it? Where do you think that came from since your parents didn't really talk about money?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think back to that summer. So when I was in the seventh grade, I took a computer class. It was just like a basic how to use Microsoft Office type class. And I just thought back then computers were so cool. And I think that really motivated me to want to buy that particular thing. And it's interesting because, you talk about I saved up for that big goal and I didn't spend it on other stuff, because that was not at all like for the rest of my early young adult life. I was a spender. I spent all of my money and then some. It wasn't until I was in my early to mid 20s that I finally started living within my means. When I was 15, I got a job working in my cafeteria because that's the only job a 15-year-old can get. And so I made $5.15 an hour. making lunches. And then eventually I got to work for 2 hours in the morning. So I worked 6 to 8 in the morning and I prepared all the breakfast food and the lunch food and everything like that. And I remember when I got the extra 2 hours a day, I was like, I'm making an extra $10 a day. This is awesome. Just felt like so much money at the time. But I mean, I spent all of that money. At that time, I was only 15, so I didn't even have my car yet. So I don't know what I spent my money on, just random stuff. I made okay money for being a young adult. When I was 18, I got that job working for that internet provider and I was making 13 bucks an hour. And this was back in 2006. That was actually a pretty good money for an 18-year-old. But at that time, I routinely had less than a couple $100s in savings. I routinely overdrew my checking account, spending too much. I remember overdrafting it multiple times. And I remember when my $800 check would hit, it was only worth $670. I remember spending money after I got paid and not having enough to pay my rent. So then I had to use my credit card and do a cash advance on my credit card, which comes with all these fees and high interest rates and just crazy stuff. And then maxing out this credit card. And I said, all right, I'm going to sign up for another credit card just to make ends meet in air quotes, you know?
I think everybody in the audience has had like a heart attack.
Yeah, no, I was not always the good saver that I am now. And it was interesting because it kind of culminated. I was 22. I was in the Navy. I went through boot camp and during boot camp, there's 8 weeks where you can't spend money. You're getting paid, but you can't spend money. And so I left boot camp with, I think, something like $3,000 in my savings account, which was more money than I'd ever had in my entire life. I'd never had so much money. And I went through 4 months of something called A school. That's the initial part of training for your job. And during that time, I lived in the barracks. I didn't even own a car back then in Charleston because I was just living on base. My only real expense was my internet service and my cell phone bills. We're talking $100 a month, something like that. All my food was free at the galley and my rent was obviously free. I had no utilities or anything. So even though I was only making, so I think my salary back then was like $1,800 a month or something as like an E3 in the Navy, my expenses were next to nothing. And yet at the end of 4 months of A school, not only had I spent all of my paychecks that I was getting every month, but I had also spent down my savings to about $400. And it was to the point where when I wanted to go home for Christmas in 2010, I just barely had enough money to buy the plane ticket home to Arizona. And that was like a shocking moment for me because I kind of knew that I had this growing credit card debt and some student loans that I had taken out that I didn't really need to take out, but they gave it to me. So I took it. I had all this debt. And when I had this happen, this realization of where the hell did all my money go? I have no expenses. Where did all my money go? I started totaling everything up and I realized that I had about $15,000 of credit card debt. So I had nothing in savings. I had $15,000 in credit card debt. And I remember doing the math and thinking if all the interest rates were 0%, which they were not, but even if they were 0%, it would take me 2.5 years throwing $500 a month at this to get these paid off. And holy cow, it was almost like my rock bottom moment financially because I felt like such a failure. I felt super ashamed. I felt like I should be able to do this. I'm 22 years old. How have I not figured out this money thing? And there was a huge amount of just feeling worthless, feeling like a failure. And again, this is one of those things that we should all talk about because lots of people feel like that and we just don't talk about it. But it did kind of light a fire under my butt because I went through and I started analyzing where's all my money going. For me, it was fast food. It was things like fast food, going out to dinner, going to Best Buy, buying stupid stuff that I didn't need to buy, like just a bunch of random transactions. It wasn't any big thing. It was just random transactions that were just eating away all of my savings and my paycheck. So that realization kind of got me serious. And that was the first time I ever did a budget. And I was able to get my spending under control where I was able to put a little bit into savings and then start really throwing money in my credit card debt. And I was lucky that I discovered this at the beginning of my Navy career because I started out as an E3, a very low rank. And over the years, I got promoted E4, E5, E6. Your pay, even if you don't get promoted, your pay goes up with cost of living adjustments. You get time and service raises. So you actually end up with all these like pretty significant raises over time. And so that just accelerated my path. And then on top of that, I had an enlistment bonus coming down the road that was like, I think $14,000. And so I was able to actually put like half of that into my TSP, which is the government 401k program, which was just a perfect time to do that. This is like 2012, I think. So it's just a big chunk of money into the TSP. But I was lucky in that I started figuring these things out when I was a relatively low salary and I was due to get some significant pay raises over time. Because if I had discovered it much later in life where I was making $80,000 a year, but I was spending 85, it would have been a lot harder to cut back than it was to start attacking this at a low salary and then use my pay raises to rapidly get myself out of debt.
I feel like the stories of some of us who are good with money now seem to be very similar, where we hit the financial rock bottom when we realize that we have a massive amount of debt of some kind. I remember mine was I was living in New York City and I was cleaning out my closet and I was going to donate a bunch of clothes. And I mean, the initial thought was I was making room for more clothes to buy.
Yeah.
And as I was putting some of these clothes on the bed, I realized that there was like, it was a huge, I mean, it was huge. It was like a freaking like 2 foot stack of clothes, and half of them had the tags on them. And I
Wow.
was like, what the hell? I have $8,000 of credit card debt and all these clothes that I don't wear. And I'm going out drinking every weekend and feeling like crap. And I'm smoking cigarettes because I'm going out drinking because my cigarette addiction was like tied to my drinking. And I was like, I need to stop this. So I literally did a budget where I had a notebook, like a little tiny notebook that I just wrote my expenses in and how much I could pay off of debt. I actually found that notebook about a month ago and I was like, wow. And it was from about 2010, 2011. I can't believe I lived off of $1,000 a month in New York City. Like it was, I think, $1,400. I don't know how I did that because my rent was 1,000. So I don't know how I did that, but I was able to pay my debt off. And I also quit drinking for a year. And then because I quit drinking for a year, I was able to quit smoking. And it was fantastic. But it's just funny how not everybody who's good with money has that kind of story, but I feel like a lot of us who are a little bit obsessive
Yeah.
and want to talk about it all the time have something like this. But this actually makes me want to go into your coaching business, your financial coaching business. What kind of drew you to doing that? And you said you've been doing it for 3 years. I'd love to learn more about why you started doing that and the type of people that you like to help.
Yeah. Like I said before, I really struggled early on and got to the point where I started paying off debt. And then I had put that chunk of money in my TSP and the stock market was just doing great. And I watched that grow. And I was like, wow, I didn't understand what stocks were or what index funds were or anything like that. It turns out I was just investing in essentially the S&P 500, right? That's the C fund inside the TSP. And during that time, the stock market was doing great. And I was like, what is this magic money machine that is growing my money? I didn't understand. I thought stock investing was like you had to really make it big on some stock. That's how you build wealth. I didn't understand back then that you can just put away money each month and you will win. So anyway, I started putting more into my TSP as my salary went up and I was putting more and more in. And I found that other people in the Navy were also sort of struggling, right? They didn't know anything about like the TSP and they weren't contributing at all. And I was like, no, you got to do this. It's really cool. It grows your money. And then also people who were just really struggling, right? Because it's a pretty common thing in the military for people to come from generally low income backgrounds. And generally, we didn't necessarily have a person who taught us about investments or living within our means. In fact, a lot of people that join the military don't even have a checking account. And when I was in basic training, Navy Federal Credit Union comes to sign people up for a checking account so they can do their direct deposit. But that's like kind of the level of financial experience and literacy that a lot of people in the military come in with. And unfortunately, you might think that we would all join and make this pretty decent paycheck and say, oh, we're just going to save a big portion of this so that we never have to go back to that. But we don't. We just spend all of it. So anyway, I found myself having a lot of conversations with people about investments and paying off debt and things that I kind of struggled with. There's a collateral duty in the Navy called Command Financial Specialist. And so anytime somebody is making a big decision, like they're going to buy a car or something like that, they're supposed to come and talk to you. And so that got me a lot of experience for talking with individuals about money purchases, buying houses, how to pay off student loans, how to pay off credit card debt, things like that. So I started doing a lot more of that work. And I did that at all three commands. I did it on my first boat, and then when I was on shore duty, and then also on my last boat, I was the command financial specialist. It was one of the few duties that I had that I thoroughly enjoyed. It was my favorite part of the Navy that only made up about 3% of my actual time. One of the really fun things that I got to do was that you had to check in with the command financial specialist when you reported to the boat because they wanted to make sure that you didn't have a bunch of really bad financial issues that was going to make you a target for like Russians or Chinese people like bribing you with money to pass along classified information, right? Things like that. So that was the purpose of that program. But I used it as an opportunity to really dig into people's financial situations when they checked in. How are you doing on savings? Are you contributing to your thrift savings plan? Do you know about the 5% match that you can get? All of these different things that people just don't know about because nobody's ever had that conversation with them. Over the years, I had tons and tons of conversations with service members. During that time when I was in Virginia and I had that sort of cheesy desk job, I had a lot of free time. And so I started volunteering with an organization called the Navy and Marine Corps Relief Society. And that was a place where service members who needed money because they were behind on their rent or their car was about to get repossessed or whatever the case was, they came in to get an interest-free loan, right, from us. We were a charity. And along with this check that we would give them, we did financial counseling. We opened up a budget. We looked for ways that they could save money. We wanted to get them on a path that they did not need these sort of emergency loans, right? And we want to put them on a better financial path. And that was just an amazing experience. I worked with some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with. That was very fulfilling work, even though it was just something I was volunteering at in the afternoons that I had free. So I got to work with probably a couple of hundred service members during that time, doing budget counseling and helping them through that. Sometimes you talk to people, they just wanted the check and they did the budget counseling and didn't really, you could tell they weren't really engaged. But sometimes I had people that were taking notes and were really engaged. And I knew that they were going to be making really good financial changes. I just thoroughly enjoyed that experience. And yeah, so I learned about financial coaching. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know if that was a business that people ran. I knew that there were financial advisors that helped you with investments and stuff like that. But I didn't know that there was a job that you could do where literally your job was helping people get clarity around their money, get their debt paid off, learn how to invest and things like that. So when I learned about that, I started connecting with other people who were doing that. And then in early 2022, when I was in the process of transitioning out of the Navy, I started a financial coaching business that I struggled to come up with a name. So me and Ashley came up with Dream Financial Coaching. So I started that. And it's been interesting because the first couple of years, I really didn't charge people money. And at the very beginning, I was like, oh, I just want to do it for free for a while to kind of get the hang of things, get some people to write some reviews, blah, blah, blah. But then whenever it would come up, well, I discovered two things. One is that I feel very uncomfortable around the conversation of selling, you know what I mean? Selling my own services, even though I'm really good at helping people, but it's just so awkward to ask for money. And so I found a couple of things. I found that even when I had a customer who I wanted to charge money to, I just could not bring myself to even have that conversation. And I would kind of wimp out and I would say, oh, I'm just doing this for free right now. But what I found is that the clients that I had that were non-paid just did not take it very seriously. I had clients that would not show up to meetings. I had clients that would cancel at the last minute. They would show up just not really engaged. And I was putting everything into these meetings. I was like really engaged and I had done all my research and was coming very prepared to these meetings. And when the client was not giving their 100%, it really affected me. And I struggle with like self-confidence and everything. And so I would internalize those things and I would say, oh, it's because I'm not very good. That's because they just don't want to tell me that they don't want to work with me. I'm just not very good. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Your brain always finds ways to sort of, I don't know, kick yourself when you're down.
Other people's actions really have nothing to do with us, right? It's that they had no skin in the game. So this is a little different, but it's sort of parallel. I go to a gym, right? And I have a gym membership and I'm very used to that gym membership. And so I'm not always taking advantage of it every single month. But I did sign up for a women's weightlifting class that was an extra like $250 for an 8-week program. There was only 5 women in the class. And so we got to know each other. And so there was so much skin in the game that I went to every single class, including the 2 makeup classes I didn't have to go to the makeup classes if I didn't want to, but I did. And then there's this other concept that my partner's cousin taught me about value. People value things more when they cost more or when they cost anything. I think there's some sort of example about if you give away a book for free, less people will take it than if you sell it for $10 and or even 10 cents. They like more people will take it if it's for sale versus if it's free. And yeah, it's such an interesting human psychology thing that you just don't really know about when you start a business. And I'm with you. Before I did the podcast, I was doing something called a Latte Money that was sort of coaching, but I didn't do one-on-one coaching. I did workbooks and stuff. And I hardly ever had anybody buy it. And I tried the whole pricing thing and everything, but I just felt so gross when I was trying to sell stuff because I was like, who the hell am I to tell people this? I don't have any credentials. I'm an art historian. So just saying that I see you, but I also see you in the fact that when I talk to you about money, because I sat down with you at CampFI and talked to you, and there were people lining up to talk to you, I felt like you were the expert in that conversation. And yet we obviously found money in FI in very similar ways, in very similar timelines. We probably know very similar things. And yet I deferred to you the whole time because I saw you as the expert. So I would give yourself more credit. You have a gravitas to the way you speak about things that even though you might think that you don't have a lot of confidence, you can't tell that. You're telling me this now, and I'm like, really? Because you seem to know your stuff.
Thanks for saying that. That's one of the really beautiful things about this community is that all of us have not only the voices in our own head that say, like, oh, you're not good enough, or who are you to be giving advice, or who are you to even be charging for that advice? And then sometimes you have people in normal, quote unquote, society who, like, even people that I told I was starting this business, they were like, well, I don't understand how you're going to charge broke people money. They don't have any money, blah, blah, blah. But when I would tell people in the FI community, they were super supportive. And when you have a lot of doubts in your own mind, but then you have a lot of your friends basically really building you up, like that compliment that you just gave me made me feel really good. And it gives me a lot of confidence to kind of combat the voices in my own head that say, you're not good enough. What qualifications do you have to help people with this stuff? But then when you get that feedback from other people, it really helps build you up and makes you more confident to, like, okay, this is the right sort of career path for me. Because I do love doing it. I love helping people work through these issues, helping people who are sort of feel really desperate or the same feelings that I experienced when I realized like how much debt I had, which is feelings of worthlessness, feelings of being a failure. A lot of the people that I work with are kind of struggling with that same thing. And I really enjoy sort of digging deep into their situation, both the financial aspects and the emotional aspects, and helping them work through that and watching them grow from people who just have no confidence in their ability to manage money and are struggling paycheck to paycheck to having clarity around where their money situation is and where it's going and having a plan for the future that they're actually executing and just watching their confidence build. It's just such an amazingly rewarding career. So yeah, anyway, that's my business. And just this past year, I've started to charge people. I started out so small. I practiced the sales conversation with my wife because I got a client to sign up through my website. And she helped me practice the sales conversation. I decided at that time on a price of $50 for the initial discovery session and one follow-up session, which is for the amount of time that goes into it is just like literally nothing. But it was a number that was small enough that I could say it without throwing up. So that first client, I had the sales conversation and I totally butchered it. In fact, I even think I said, all right, now for the awkward sales talk. I told her the price was $50 and she didn't even blink. She was like, okay. As time has gone on, I've raised my prices multiple times as I've gained a little bit more confidence. But it's interesting because I've had some realizations in the past few months. I was talking with another financial coach that's a friend of mine, and she asked me an interesting question. She said, is this a business for you or is it just a hobby? And I wanted to say, oh, yeah, of course it's a business. But then I started thinking about it and I realized, well, I'm not really treating it like a business. Like I don't really tell a lot of people what I do. I'm not posting anything on LinkedIn. I'm not actively trying to find clients. I'm sort of just passively letting them find me through word of mouth, or maybe they found my website or something like that. And for a long time, I think I was telling myself, like, oh, I don't really need the money right now. And so that's why I'm not really focused on building this into a real business because I don't need the revenue. But I think that was just what I was telling myself. I think the real reason is that, again, it goes back to those self confidence issues. If I don't put myself out there, if I don't tell people what I'm doing and sort of put myself out there as a person that knows how to work through these financial problems with people, then I won't have to open myself up to criticism or failure or anything like that. And so it's really, I've done a lot of thinking the past couple of months of, okay, what does this look like? What does this being a real business look like? Because ultimately, I don't really care that much about the revenue. I really care about meeting with as many people as I can. Because when I have a conversation with somebody and I'm able to help them calm their emotions a little bit and get some clarity around where their money is going and get kind of a plan set in place of like how to dig themselves out of whatever situation they're facing, like those are my best days. When I work with a client, it just lights me up. And Ashley always points out, I come downstairs and I'm like, I just have the greatest phone call. And that's how my clients make me feel by not putting myself out there and telling people what I do. And again, holding myself out to be a professional who can help people with these issues. Ultimately, it's kind of hurting myself because I'm having less of these amazing conversations. So that's something that I'm working on, is creating this into a real business and figuring out, okay, how do I reach out to more people? How do I let people know what I'm doing? Because unfortunately, I'm not on anything except for LinkedIn. I don't really do social media anymore. And so I'm not advertising on that. So that's something I'm working through now, is like, okay, how do I let people know what I'm doing?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's something that Alan Donegan has said before in his Rebel Business School, where he says that that adage of if you build it, they will come is not true when it comes to a business. Like you have to tell people about it. And then when I listen to this podcast, I'm referring to a podcast episode that he did about starting a podcast. He didn't really get specific about how to tell people, but basically he was like, you can't just wait passively for people to come to you because it's not gonna work. You got to tell people. But I get it. Like I tell people in the FI community, but I struggle to tell people in my regular life who are not into the financial independence movement with me because finance is such a faux pas topic that I get a little bit nervous. And when I tell people I have a podcast, because I do tell people I'm recording a podcast tonight, so I can't go out and do this thing. And people are like, oh my God, what's your podcast about? And I'm just like, finance. And then I just move on because I'm so worried that they're actually going to listen to it and listen to me and think I'm insane. So I'm with you on that. But I will say that you deserve to get paid for the skill that you have because you have a very specific skill. Even though there's a lot of different financial coaches, your specific way of financial coaching is exactly what you said. You're able to kind of calm the storm for people because you have a very calming presence and you deserve to get paid for that. I'm glad that you're charging now. And I'm definitely going to put your website in the show notes to this show. So hopefully more people will come to you. And I would encourage even people in the FI community who think they've got it all figured out. Like I said, I went to David at CampFI to go over my numbers. And there were just things that we talked about that I never really thought about. I actually took some of your advice, David. I think you said at your point, cash is actually probably better for you right now. And I actually did that. I walked my investments back a little bit and did cash instead. And the way that I told myself, because you said something like, it's still your money, whether or not it's invested or in cash. Like you're still paying yourself. It's just that you're paying yourself to allow your future self to do specific things. And the cash is going to allow you to do something very different than your investments that you have to keep in for a while. So it was super illuminating to me.
Thanks so much for saying that. That makes me feel really good. I do remember that conversation and I'm so glad that was helpful for you. Yeah, I just need to work on sort of like we talked about, actually putting myself out there as an expert and everything. Yeah, it's because ultimately, like I said, having those types of conversations, that's part of what makes CampFI so fun. Is I often get to sort of look at people's numbers and help them work through those issues. And that's a little bit separate from like the financial coaching that I do with people because I'm really looking to work with people who are struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to figure out how to gain control of their finances and get clarity about where they're at. I don't know, the charging people in the FI community, it's something that I've thought about before, but it just makes me feel so uncomfortable. And it's really fascinating because a friend of mine who's also in the fire community, he's always poking at me to charge the people in the fire community for looking at their numbers and helping them sort of work through the mental issues of pulling the trigger. But it just does not feel right. And part of that is because these are my friends. Part of that is because I love having conversations around financial independence and helping people work through their numbers. And in fact, I actually had one person who I know in the fire community, and I told her the price, and at that time I was charging $200, and she was like, "Okay, no problem." And then we were meeting in about a week, and then I went to CampFI, and I could not get over the fact that all the stuff that I was going to be helping her with, I was going to be doing for free for people at CampFI because I love doing it. And I was like trying to reconcile in my mind, well, how is that justified? How is it justified to charge her money for doing it over Zoom and not charge people for doing it at CampFI? And then I started thinking about, well, maybe I tell people like, oh yeah, if we want to talk more, I actually do this as a business and we can charge then. But then I'm going to feel like maybe people will think that I go to CampFI just to recruit clients. And I was just going through all this stuff. I finally decided, no, the people that are dealing with fire type things of running their numbers, helping them work through those issues, I'm just not going to charge for that because number one, those are not the types of clients that do not come prepared. Like they do come prepared for the meeting and everything. I've never had somebody flake out on me or make me feel bad about myself because they ghosted me or didn't come prepared or whatever. But again, the other thing is I don't ever want to seem like the type of person who is coming just to recruit clients. And I also don't want people to not come and talk to me about those types of issues because they don't want to get sort of looped into sales situation. You know what I mean? So as of right now, if you're in the fire community and you just want me to look at your numbers and stuff like that, definitely reach out. It's probably not something that I'm going to charge you for. I'll look at your numbers with you and, probably tell you to quit your job.
I wonder if there's like a middle ground where you could be like, I am totally down with looking at anybody in the FI community's numbers because we're on the same page. But if you know anybody in your life that needs more consistent financial help that you think an outside coach could help them with, say it's one of their family members who's just completely tired of them talking about money and might do better listening to a third party, then you can be like, would you mind recommending me? That can be their payment, is spreading the word about your business. And so it's like you're doing it for free, but you're also asking your friends to tell people about you, which is totally valid.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I've been pretty lucky in that a couple of people have actually one person referred their sister to me, and that was a paid client, and other people have told their friends. But no, I think that's a great idea. And I think the other part that goes along with that is just like being a little bit more direct with people about what I do. Oh, I help, people who are struggling living paycheck to paycheck, and that's how I make my money. And then I think a lot of people will just refer people to me just because of that.
They're your friends, they want to help you.
Mhm.
And they'll probably be like, yeah, oh my God, that's so great. And you're also part of the fire movement. So maybe you can recruit more people to our side.
Yeah, it's very interesting because all of us have these sort of self-confidence, imposter syndrome issues or whatever. And I'm the same, but you mentioned like people will want to sort of support my business. And it's funny because when it's me looking at other people's businesses, I have a friend who's a health coach. I want to tell anybody that I encounter that's dealing with like, oh, go talk to my friend so-and-so because they have a health coaching business and I want them to make money. Or even Steven, the guy that runs CampFI, I want him to make a lot of money off of CampFI so that he's motivated to keep doing that. And I want him to be financially successful. And so it's interesting how when we look at other people's situation, of course, we want their businesses to be super prosperous.
And it's funny when it comes to other people, you're like, yeah, I want to support them. But then when it comes to you, you're like, I'm taking advantage. So I totally get that. So we are coming towards the end of our time. And before you leave, I would love it if you could leave the audience with a life hack recommendation or learning. I mean, you've already taught us so much, but is there anything that we've kind of not talked about that you want to share before we leave?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much I could share. I would say if you haven't already, plug into the community, right? This is just the best group of people ever. And you'll have much deeper conversations in person. And it won't just be about money. It's about making your life as good as it can be. That's really the focus of the FI community. It's like building your best life. And money is just a tool, one of the tools that you use to do it. But the other thing that I'll say is that, and again, this is a lot of the online community, they learn about the 4% rule and saving up 25 times your expenses. And they sort of just get glued to that and they say, okay, I've calculated it out. I've got to put my head down for 12 more years and then I'll be there. And then I can start living my life. And my recommendation to you is if you have even a little bit of financial runway, if you've got a couple of years worth of expenses saved up, if you're not happy in your job, start looking at other things that you could be doing to give you a better work-life balance or find a career that actually lights you up and gets you excited to get out of bed in the morning, even if it pays a lot less money. Or maybe the right decision for you is you are wound so tight that you just need to take some time off. It is perfectly fine. Even if you only have a couple of years worth of runway, it is perfectly fine to take 3 months or 6 months or 12 months off and just take a breather and try to figure out what do you want your life to look like. So I really encourage you, even though when you look at the math of walking away from your high paying job and letting off the gas with savings, and in fact, spending down some of your savings, that can be a very scary thing. But the only thing that's really limited on this planet is time. You can always make more money later on. There's an almost unlimited amount of money that you can make, but you will never ever get the time back. And that's assuming that you live till you're in your mid 80s. Some of us will not make it to then, but there are things that happen. There's a member of the FI community who his wife passed away a few years ago and nobody was expecting that. And they were actually very lucky in that they had been retired for about 6 years. They retired early. And that's amazing years that they got to spend together. And I just think about if that person had continued working at his very high paying career until the normal retirement age, he wouldn't have needed that extra money, but he would have never gotten that time back with his wife. And of course, that's not going to happen to most people. Most of us are going to live real long lives. But even when I talk to people who are like 50, right? And they say, oh, I just need to work for 5 more years. That's a long time. But you might only have 20 more good, healthy years where you can do all the stuff you want to. So if you can find a way to pull that trigger sooner or move on to something that you really enjoy sooner, definitely do that. Even if it means you will die with a little bit less money. You can always make more money later on, but you can never get back that time. Figure out if you can make your life better now, even at the sacrifice of delaying your FI number or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. I love it so much. Yeah, David, how can people reach you if they'd like to learn more?
Yeah, reach out, send me an email. It's just david@dreamfinancialcoaching.com. I have a very primitive website because, again, I just have not been taking this as serious as I should. So don't judge me based on the quality of my website. But there's also a link on there that you can schedule an appointment. So yeah, just schedule one of the free 30-minute sessions and we'll talk about whatever you're going through, whether it's fire related or if you really do need some financial help working through your situation. You can reach me there. Or you can just go to CampFI. I attend many, many CampFIs, so chances are you'll run into me in person.
Yeah, that's my vote. Go to CampFI. Thank you so much, David. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you for being willing to be so vulnerable and coming on the show and sharing your life story with us. I can't wait to see you at CampFI.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on and letting me talk about some of these difficult topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Everyday Fi podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfipodcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.